In deficiencies, iron deficiency anemia is probably the most famous. It's the most common anemia there is. And it's dietary for the most part. Iron deficiency anemia. And things they need to eat are dried fruits, because dried fruits are always high in iron. And remember, vitamin C can help that iron get into the tissue. Iron needs vitamin C. Vitamin C doesn't need iron. Iron can get there a little bit without it, but vitamin C just gives it a boost. Egg yolks, dried beans, meat. And your best source of vitamin C is the red bell pepper. Second source, the green bell pepper. And then citrus and some of your other green vegetables. Remember, on vitamin C, once again, on vitamin C, it needs to be taken daily. It needs to be dark. So if you keep orange juice, keep it in the refrigerator dark. It needs to be covered, and heat will kill it. So you can't cook vitamin C foods and expect that you're getting vitamin C. And we'll talk some more about that in class too, the vitamin C. Then another one that has to do with deficiencies is pernicious anemia, which is also called B12 deficiency anemia, B12. And the reason it's a defect, or a deficiency, but it could be a defect, you're lacking the intrinsic factor. You say, well, that sounds like a defect. That's the reason I say forget defect and deficiency. But they all come under those umbrellas, but don't try to keep them straight. There's an intrinsic factor, and you may have already studied it, in your GI system that will break down B12. If you don't have that factor, you're not going to break down B12 in your GI tract. If you break down B12 in your GI tract, it gets absorbed in your blood, and you're healthy. And if you ate a lot of B12, then it would come out in your urine. But the point is, the word absorbed is absorbed from the GI tract into the bloodstream. And that's absorbing, and you have to have the intrinsic factor for it to absorb. If it doesn't absorb, what does B12 do? Well, it might break down, but it's not going to absorb, and it goes into your fecal material. So there's a test, an important test called the Schilling's test. Schillings, Schilling's test. And when somebody comes in and they're anemic, all these anemias I just told you, the physician has to decide which one. And so they look at the MCV, and they're all low. Everything is peculiar, so they need to run a pernicious anemia, just seeing if they even have this intrinsic factor. And the test, and we can talk about it again in class, but in essence, the patient's given a shot of B12. So that's going to absorb real fast. I mean, not real fast because it's muscular, but it's going to absorb. It's not in your GI tract. It's going to go straight to the muscle, to the bloodstream. Then they give them, so it's absorbed. Then they give them a radioactive B12 pills. Radioactive. They have them go, it's 2 o'clock we'll say, they go urinate. They got their shot at 2. They took their medicine at 2. They urinated at 2. And remember, we throw away the specimen. If you start at 2 o'clock, that one's thrown away. We have an empty jug that is called 2 o'clock, even though you threw away the 2 o'clock urine, because it was urine gotten before 2 o'clock. Just reminding you. So it's 2 o'clock. And during the next 24 hours, you save the urine. At 2 o'clock tomorrow, You urinate, put it in the jug, it's sent down to see the radioactive B12 in the urine. Now, if you'll think about it, I got a lot in my shot. They gave me a lot by mouth. If I have the intrinsic factor, then it's going to absorb, and I'm going to have, and go through my body, and excess will go in my urine. So, and this was powerful. I got a lot there. So I don't need all this B12 that I got because I absorbed B12. So my urine is high in B12, because it was used. It was used and I had a lot of it. If the shot was all you got, it probably didn't have any excess. And you sure didn't get any in the GI tract. That radioactive B12 went into your fecal matter. It didn't get absorbed. So now, if you don't have the intrinsic factor that breaks down, your urine probably has a normal B12 from the shot or low, if they didn't give you that much B12. So we can talk some more in class, but that's the shillings that tell someone if you have pernicious anemia or lack the intrinsic factor. The next problem that we run into are the white blood cells. And you've already studied, I think in peds, the leukemias. And I always say, because we know white cells, 5,000, 10,000, we've already said how many make an infection or a raging infection. And if it's more than 30 or 40,000, they question it. That's just a lot. I've seen bad infections at 30,000, but they are always a little suspect when they see them that high, that it could be. And here's what happens just one day. Nobody knows why leukemia happens particularly, but one day the bone marrow is making fine, and then it just starts pouring out the making of white cells, and it's like you were making cookies. I'm into cookies today. Making cookies, and you lift the mixer up, and the dough flies all over the ceiling and the cabinets and everything, and it's not, they're just strings of it and spurts of it, and it's no form. And that's what white cells are like. The bone marrow is just pouring them out, every shape. They're worthless. They'll go up to 100,000. And that's pretty diagnostic for leukemia. You know the 4 types. You don't necessarily have to distinguish them for me. I just want you to know you have 2 that are acute and 2 that are chronic. And one's called acute lymphocytic and chronic lymphocytic. And then you've got acute monocytic and chronic monocytic. And they attack different age groups. And you probably learned ALL, acute lymphocytic leukemia in peds. And that's probably the best prognosis. They use a lot of combinations of drugs, and they might give antibodies. So there's all kinds of combinations. Yeah, why did it happen? Nobody knows. What will cure it? They just try to give chemo or something, an immunoglobulin, which is kind of an antibody, not kind of, an immunoglobulin, to try to calm down the bone marrow, interfere with that making, and see if the bone marrow will stop going crazy. So those are things they just try to work, but as you've already studied leukemia, just know that nobody knows how this happens, and nobody will talk some more in class, and nobody knows what to do about it. We have all kinds of drugs that try to arrest it and put it in remission, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But the different kinds, chronic means long life, acute usually means pretty quickly, takes your life. Multiple myeloma is it's lymphatic kind of problem with white cells, and the lymph system kind of goes with our white blood problems. And it's a problem of bone marrow and tumors in the bone marrow. It's usually, you have pain. I want you to keep there's some names I want you to keep some things to keep in mind with multiple myeloma. It's diagnosed through a Bence, B-E-N-C-E-Jones, Bence-Jones test, which is a 24-hour urine, again, and it is checking calcium and protein levels. Because when this tumor starts happening, when this problem starts happening, pours out calcium and protein. And so, usually chemo is given to try to shrink the tumors. You can imagine the pain with multiple myeloma when you've got bone lesions. Lesion, another word for tumor. So, I want you to think hypercalcemia. I want you to think of pain. I want you to think Bence-Jones test. And then your book brings up CRAB. It's the only place I've seen it used, but it's a good definition. C-R-A-B. It says high calcium for the C. Renal insufficiency. The kidneys just can't get all that calcium out. You're anemic because your bone marrow is busy doing things it shouldn't do. And you've got bone lesions, B for bone lesions, C-R-A-B. Lymphoma is the next white type problem. And we have two types, non-Hodgkin's and Hodgkin's. And the difference is really in the type cell that's in the tumors. They're lymphomas. They're in the lymph system, tumors in the lymph system. And about all I'd like for you to know is the words Reed, R-E-E-D, hyphen Sternberg, S-T-E-R-N, Berg, B-E-R-G. And they're cells that are found in Hodgkin's. If somebody feels a lump, oh, it's probably in my lymph system, and they biopsy and it has the Reed-Steinberg cells, it's probably Hodgkin's. If it isn't, it's non-Hodgkin's or lymphoma. Neither one of them are great. I really think, and it's my opinion, Hodgkin's have a better prognosis. Lymphomas, all of them are not good because they're tumors in the lymph system that begin to press against nerves and press against vital organs. And that's their problem. They just get bigger and have to be removed. They usually divide them into 4 stages. I think it's kind of interesting to know. You don't have to necessarily for a test, but stage 1 is you find a node, one node in the lymphatic system, wherever. Stage 2, more than one node on the same side of the body, upper or lower. I found 2 nodes and they're both upper. Stage 3 is nodes are on both sides, but they're not big and they're not many. I don't know what not big and not many mean, but that's right. Stage 4, there are nodes everywhere, tumors everywhere. And now we're to disorders of the platelets. And people are considered, normal platelets. I think we said 100,000 to 450,000 or something like that. 100,000, 400, in those ballparks of 400,000, starting at 100,000. Anything under 100,000, somebody is considered thrombocytopenic. They're low platelets. And if they're high risk for bleeding, if they bumped up to somebody and bled or accidentally cut and bled, high risk for bleeding are at 50,000 or lower. And spontaneously bleeding, when you just start bleeding, you're just sitting here listening to me and you